Good day, viewers. Welcome to a new edition of 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television. My name is Manir Dan Ali. Our guest today is a professor of psychiatry from the University of Ibadan, who is also the provost of the medical school there, Professor Olayinka Omigbodun. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
You just delivered a paper at the Nigerian Academy of Sciences where you spoke about the issues surrounding or touching on adolescent mental health and how it impacts on nations. Why is that important?
The title was Great Nations Would Pay Heed to the Mental Health of the Developing Brain. When you talk about mental health, many times people think about the person on the street who is unkept. No, that's not mental health. Everybody needs mental health. Mental health is from the word health. And when you talk about what is health, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So in that regard, mental health is a state of well-being whereby the person has a sense of well-being. They feel they can cope with stresses. They have good interpersonal relationships. They have optimal psychological functioning. They can work productively at home, at work. They can adapt to adversity. Adversity comes. They can adapt to change.
Relate to people.
Yes, without difficulty. Yeah. So that is what mental health is, and every person needs mental health. So mental health is a positive aspect of health that everybody needs. And I must mention that there is a continuum, because on one extreme you have what we call positive mental health, good mental health, and then there is a line continuum, and the other side you have what we call mental illness.
So there could be people who are in between.
Yes.
And maybe even tilted towards one of the extreme ends.
Yes. So for example, most people at some point or other would have mental health symptoms. What are some of the common mental health symptoms? Poor sleep, anxiety, you're worrying, you feel tense, you have maybe you have financial problem, you go to bed at night for 2 hours, you can't sleep. You feel a band of tightness around your head, even in your tummy, you'll be feeling like as if your stomach is somersaulting, like worms. All those are evidence of anxiety. Some other times when we talk about, which are what we call common mental disorders, like anxiety, even depression.
Depression.
Quite common. You find that you have low energy, you feel down, unhappy.
Why is it that make people so depressed these days? Because I don't know, in the past, maybe is it because we were not talking about it, but these days you find that a lot of people are complaining or feeling depressed or in a state of depression.
Well, you see, the state of mental health depends very much on the state of what is going on around in the nation, around in the environment, in the family. And I must mention that there has been a lot of stressors recently. In the last couple of months, I'm sure you must have known that there was a stress. I'll give a practical example. During the time when people couldn't access cash.
Quite stressful.
Oh,
people were almost like getting mad.
Yeah, they were breaking down.
Yes.
They were breaking down because I work with people, different people, and also as a psychiatrist. People were going to bed at night, they were not sleeping. People were crying. People were worried. And so on and so. Even during the COVID, not because we have just come out of the COVID, although there's still, during the COVID-19, it was even worse. Because, as a people, we are very social people. We like to gather. We like to go to, whether it is to the mosque, to the church, we meet with friends. During the COVID-19 period, many people that I actually thought were quite stable were breaking down. They were getting depressed, they were crying, they were feeling down, loss of energy, loss of interest.
Because of the isolation that was forced on
because of the isolation
everybody.
And the uncertainty.
Right.
And then they couldn't go out. And then, many people didn't know, what was going to happen next.
And there didn't seem to be a quick end to it.
Yes. It was so sudden, and there appeared to be no answers. There was an increase in mental health conditions during that period. And then, many times, you can leave your house and go and come back. But you had whole families having to stay together, particularly during the lockdown period. Husband, wife, and children. And then many times there was no food or nowhere to go and recreate, because many people live in crowded housing.
And some people say that they love their own spaces. And this time around, you are all cramped up together, chick in jail, as they say.
Yes. So you find stressors bring about mental illness, mental health conditions. And the truth is, everybody has a breaking point. If everybody has a breaking point, if they have enough stress, they will break. Then what is not certain is the nature of the break. Whether the breakdown or whether the mental illness that would come would be depression or anxiety or what we call post-traumatic stress symptoms.
Or even worse, one is walking around.
Yes, what we call psychotic. That's what we call psychosis. When the person loses touch with reality, they start to hear voices and nobody's talking. They have abnormal beliefs. They could tell you, oh, some people are coming to attack me, some people are coming to kill me. Oh, my mother-in-law has put poison in my food. My children, their lives are in danger. They can't go to school anymore. And that's what we call psychosis. So, the nature, there are so many different kinds of mental health conditions.
And it appears that apart from what you spoke of earlier, that is the lockdown and all of that, and then the
cash
currency
problem,
the cash squeeze as a result of change of the currency. What about the growing poverty? I mean, the figures are almost unbelievable. They said over 100 million Nigerians have slipped into poverty. How is that affecting mental health?
Well, there's a saying that, there's poverty is a best friend to mental illness. There's a cycle, poverty and mental illness. All research show that when there's poverty, the mental illness rates go up. And we all know now that the current research, is showing that people living on less than the equivalent they use is a US dollar, about 1.5, $1.50, about maybe going up to almost 50%. And then those living on less than $5 a day, about maybe going up to about 80-90%. And many of them are actually lecturers. They may be in the university sector, because with the depreciation of the naira, what people could buy with the money is very little.
So even the middle class is more or less been affected by...
the middle class is eroded. And I don't know if we have a middle class anymore. But people can't afford, they don't have living wages to be able to take care of their day-to-day basic needs. And when that comes in, there'll be a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, problems of sleep, and then that starts to affect the mental health, and you could have any kind of mental illness, particularly what we call the common mental disorders, which are anxiety and depression. On top of that, we also have what we call stress, like when there's a major traumatic event, we have what we call post-traumatic stress disorders, like maybe somebody witnesses an armed robbery or a kidnapping attack or a bomb, or almost averted plane crash. After that, they have what we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress symptoms. They start having feelings of numbness. They feel loss of interest, similar to depression. They feel down in their mood. They cry, and but in addition to that, they are now very what we call hyper vigilant. If the door just makes a little noise, they immediately have a startle response.
I read recently the people who were kidnapped in the Abuja-Kaduna train 1 year after they were saying they are living with all these things that you are mentioning.
Absolutely.
So it's common when you witness those kind of events.
They would certainly have, a lot of them would have what we call post-traumatic stress disorders. And I don't know if they've been able to access help.
Yeah, I wanted to say, how do you deal with that?
Well, that's where therapy comes in. Unfortunately, those who can carry out the therapy are few in the country, and that's another area we need to work on. And another big thing, unfortunate thing, is that the doctors and the health professionals are actually leaving now because they're going to areas of the world where they feel safer, where the wages are better.
So they have also been stressed out because of the Nigerian situation. As I speak now,
and the resident doctors on strike. Yes. So it's very sad, but every day we get letters of resignation. People are moving to countries, and if you look at the health, the indicators of those countries, you find they're very much better in terms of the well-being indicators, the life expectancy indicators, access to school, to education, to health, the basic, what we call basic needs that allow a person to now build upon and do other things.
So in any setting, whether family or country, your economic status could well determine your mental health.
Oh yes, yes, absolutely. Mental health is very, very closely linked to the economic status. And even the well-being indicators. You talk about human development index. What are the human development index? You look at what are the criteria. It talks about, your health and well-being, how many years of schooling you've had, how many years of productive work you can put in before you die or retirement. So issues of access to health, well-being. And we also have problems of a very low life expectancy here. People, 52.
In the 50s.
Yes, in the 50s. So there's because most people don't even have access to the basic screening. When I did my residency in the United Kingdom, and when it's time for you to come in for medicals, they write you a letter. They will say, Madam, Dr. Omigbodun, come on this day we're going to screen, we want to do some screening tests. So there are systems in place whereby there are regular screening, blood pressure, blood sugar, to make sure there's no diabetes. They also test the eyes, and so that they can pick up basic, simple, problems, so that there can be prevention put in place. But even those, most people in this nation don't have access to those. There are people moving around with blood pressures of 200, and particularly there's a link between stress and BP.
And all this sudden death syndrome that we tend to have.
If you're stressed up, because there's what we call chronic stress. There are stress hormones, cortisol, and some other hormones.
Yes.
So those hormones, they are being secreted into the body when you're under stress. And if it goes on for a long time, it affects not only the mental health, that is, you may have depression, poor sleep, poor appetite, feeling tired all the time, low energy, loss of interest, loss of appetite, low libido, you feel irritable, you have problems concentrating, you're supposed to do a task in 2 days, you are finding 1 month has gone by, you can't focus.
Yes.
That's all symptoms of depression. But in addition to that, you could also have what we call the stress symptoms that cause physical problems. So then high blood pressure, body aches and pains, and so many other things. And then, of course, you could also have, things like diabetes. And when people are stressed out, they tend to do they don't eat well.
Right.
You eat junk food and things that are not healthy.
But some will say, does it have something to do with our modern way of life. That is, our parents, grandparents had simpler, less complicated, less pressured kind of lives. And the modern life, where you have to have a career, you are expected to do this and that, doesn't that add to, affect the mental health of people?
Interestingly, some of the research showed that mental health conditions were actually lower in some of the rural agrarian farming like areas where life is at a more peaceful pace. You wake up in the morning, you can go to your farm, pick a few yams, sit under a tree and so on. But the interesting thing is that because of poverty and the pull and the push, there's been a massive emigration out of the rural areas into the cities. And
where
that,
the opportunities
yes, well, opportunities in quotes. So you find that, and that has actually broken the fabric of many families.
Very interesting point.
Yes.
But at this point, I would like us to go on a short break and resume the discussion thereafter. Welcome back. It is still 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television. Before we went on break, you are talking about how research is showing that even the rural life is being affected by the modernity that we are experiencing because of the rural-urban migration, the breakdown of the family system, and what have you. Is it right to assume that the maybe number of Nigerians who are, I don't know, for want of a better word, mentally unstable seems to be increasing?
Well, I would say normally about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people have a mental illness condition. It's just that many times we don't know.
So it doesn't manifest?
Yes. Well, if somebody has depression, they may just be very irritable and unproductive in the office. But people around may not know. They may just feel that person has a bad personality, attitude. But truly the person may be depressed. So you find on average already about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 Nigerians already have a mental illness, a mental health condition that needs some form of attention. But with the current, like I mentioned, issues of increase in poverty, the rates go up. With increase in stresses and pressures and all the other, and insecurity, I must mention that problems of insecurity are a major cause of mental illness. So
you can imagine what the situation could be in the Northeast, where there has been the Boko Haram problem, and now the Northwest, where there is so much banditry. Many villages have been more or less evacuated. People can no longer go to their farms. They can't do ordinary businesses there. So are you likely to find more of mental challenges or psychiatric issues in those communities?
The impact would be honestly intergenerational and unquantifiable. Because first of all, because of those stresses, people are now tensed up and they have mental ill health problems. But I must mention to you that even particularly for mothers, right from the time a baby is in the womb, if a mother is stressed out and tense and they're secreting stress hormones, it's already impacting the baby in the womb. And so in those areas, the babies being born would have more problems right from birth. Because studies have shown that when a mother is stressed out, her babies, the neurological development, the development of the brain, in the brain there are neurons, there are cells in the brain, is being affected by stress. Not only that, when the baby is born and the mothers are in an area where there's banditry and terror and kidnapping, the mothers themselves will likely be depressed, and so they will be abusive to the child. they will be withdrawn, and also they could hurt the child, because a mother who is depressed, a mother who is irritable and also poor, because on top of that, the poverty even makes it worse. So then they will be abusive to the child.
What about like some of the Chibok girls that are still being found more than 10 years after the event? The latest one we saw is the one who had to abandon 3 of her children in order to run away. What mental state will those kind of girls be?
Yeah, I don't know if they're having assessments, but I would, first of all, they and their children need long-term intervention. They need to be under therapy long-term, because a lot of damage is already done. Even the ability to reintegrate and fit into society, because there's also going to be a lot of stigma and discrimination. So, and then the babies are already likely to have been damaged from the long period of stress, traumatic experience. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest problems of antisocial personality starts from child maltreatment. So when you have children living on the streets, children who have been separated from their parents, children who have not had love and care, I also wonder about even those who are who are perpetrating this Boko Haram. Many of them are troubled. So even those who are the terrorists themselves, many of them, if I would say, they have mental health problems. Yes, many of them have what we call antisocial personality. They've gone through trauma from maybe when they were young. They were separated from their families, what we call attachment disorders.
Right.
They were raised in very difficult circumstances. Many times maybe they had to beg. They didn't have education. They've gone through a lot of trauma. And trauma breeds antisocial personality. Antisocial personality, people who are affected, they don't have a conscience. They would kill, they would steal, they would lie, and they walk away from it.
You did say that even people from broken families, they have issues.
Yes. When in fact, one of the biggest stressors that we found in some of our research about children who are ending up under our care in the psychiatric facility were children from broken homes. Either the parents had separated, and maybe before they separated, there was a lot of fighting, you know, abuse. And physical and emotional and all sorts. And then not only that, or mother abandonment, because there's a special role of mothers in the care of their children.
Certainly.
Yes, mothers had abandoned them, or the mothers had a mental illness and were unable to care for them. And that's another important issue I must mention, that when mothers have babies, if they have depression, it can affect the baby because they are unable to care for the baby.
That's, you mean the postpartum depression?
Yes, and of course in an area of trauma it's going to be higher. On average, studies show that about 10% of women following childbirth would have postpartum depression. I don't know how many of them in this country get treated, but it's higher when they are young and adolescents, and you also know we have issues of child marriage.
Yeah.
Young girls, it's depression. Yes, depression is higher when an adolescent has given birth. And so usually when a baby is born, the mother is the one supposed to stimulate the baby, laugh and joke, but when the mother is depressed, the baby will be there.
In some instances, they even reject the children.
They reject the children, so the child is already suffering. So it's like all this trauma is a cascade going on, and it's producing a large number of young people who will now have turned on the society that raised them.
What about the other mental issue of leaders who seems to be stealing beyond any common sense, which in some instances, you know, they've been called for, there should be mental tests for people aspiring to leadership. What's the psychiatric position on that?
Well, the psychiatric organization has always said that because of stigma, you know, because there are many people who have a mental illness who can hold down a good job once they're under treatment. So to avoid stigma, we tend to shy away from saying leaders should undergo assessment. However, I would want to say that it's important to look into the past history of a leader. What kinds of experiences do they have as a child? What is their antecedents? Because they may not have a depression or a psychosis, but they may have what we call antisocial personality disorder. That's what I was talking about. That is a product of child maltreatment, whereby they are disruptive. And what I mean by that is that, you know, they would steal, tell lies, be corrupt, manipulate, because if they have a personality disorder. And people with personality disorders are not seen as mentally ill, but but they have those characteristics and traits, because there's a condition that we have in psychiatry called personality disorder, and one of them is antisocial personality disorder, and it's a product of a distorted and a traumatic childhood. And the truth is that many of them have risen up. And a lot of times, what it takes to be in leadership, you sometimes see that having that kind of disorder.
You have to be a little mental.
Well, I would say maybe having that personality disorder, because sometimes there's a lot of aggression. I'm hoping that things will change so that everyday people can go into politics. But when you have politics of aggression, killing, fighting, thuggery and all that, it's only those with personality problems, conduct problems and social that can cope with that kind of activity.
You hinted earlier that there's a dearth of psychiatrists and many other medical personnel needed to make things better. How bad is the situation, especially regarding psychiatric? Because some people they tend to think that, why should I study psychiatry? I should study maybe the mainstream medicine and others.
Well, psychiatry, I think that is gradually changing. Psychiatrists are one of the most sought after professions worldwide. Europe, Australia, US, they are looking for psychiatrists. Right now in Nigeria, it's about 1 psychiatrist to 1 million. And many of those who are training have left.
So you mean there are just about 200
Yes. And
in the whole of the country?
Yeah, or even if they're above, many have left because they are getting jobs, like they are moving out in droves. Because societies where they understand mental health, realize that you need to have psychiatrists on ground. So there's a dearth of psychiatrists presently, and those who are on ground, because of the problems of security, the problems of remuneration, the problems of inadequate things to work with, and also I just must mention something that has been affecting employment. In the past, when you want to replace in a university, the chief executive of the university can just have interviews and replace. But right now, everything is being centralized in the country. This is a country of over 200 million people. If you want to employ a driver, you have to get permission from the office of the head of service. In a country that is so vast, one of the things that is affecting us is the over-centralization of services, the over-centralization of activities.
In just a very brief way, what will you say is the state of our psychiatric facilities? That is where some people have to end up going in order to get rehabilitated.
Yes, I must mention that we have what we call the tertiary hospitals, where you admit them. And I believe that they are at least every state has one. But that shouldn't be our focus. Our focus should be having psychiatric services at primary care. I should be able to go, if I'm depressed, should be able to go to the same place where I will get treatment for malaria, treatment for BP and diabetes, and get my psychiatric treatment. And that means that we need to integrate mental health at the primary care level.
Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Viewers, that is the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep a date with us.